our exhibition this winter is called Bodies of Work, Art and Healing. My name's Courtney Gilbert, and I'm the curator at the Sun Valley Museum of Art. The exhibition features work by 6 contemporary artists exploring the connection between art and medical illness. And in the case of 4 of the artists in the exhibition, their practices have been really important ways for them to navigate the experience of what it is to be a patient. One of the reasons I was interested in curating this exhibition is as a way of having a conversation about the way that the practice of art or the practice of creativity can be healing for all of us, whether or not we consider ourselves artists. I first started thinking about planning this exhibition when I saw work by an artist based in Portland whose name is Heather Watkins. Heather has a really broad practice, everything from works on paper to sculpture, but in 2018 I saw an exhibition that she did of small embroidered works that she called Waiting Room. Each of the works is actually titled Recording and then a month and a year, and they were made while Heather was undergoing treatment for a recurrent brain tumor that affects her optic nerve. And she began actually thinking about embroidery at first because she, as part of her treatment, was getting visual field tests that indicated where she retained and where she had lost some of the vision in her eyes. And the printed record of these tests looked a lot like embroidery. So she initially started making embroidered works based on these visual field tests, and then began expanding that practice into sort of freehand, abstract embroideries that she calls waiting rooms. As she describes them, they're a record of what it is to be a patient, and then also what it is to be patient when you're going through some kind of treatment. So we have 19 of these wonderful embroideries that were made over several years. The third body of work that Heather has contributed to the show is a newly commissioned body of work that Heather titles Verso. It consists of 4 large-scale prints of the backs of some of her recordings or waiting room embroideries. They're really these kind of remarkable pieces. To some extent, they're remarkable because they're so high resolution that from a distance they look like actual textile works. But as you get closer, you realize that they're prints of the backsides of embroideries, and you can see her hand, you can see the labor that goes into each of the embroideries that she makes, all the places that she stops and starts, cuts thread, ties knots, restarts her process. And they're kind of the messy side of what happens behind these beautiful embroideries that she makes. And so she decided to print them. We talked a lot about different sizes and scales. And in the end, she landed on X-ray, standard X-ray size, because for her, they are very similar to medical scans and to the idea of looking into the body and seeing what's hidden from view on the surface. Another artist whose work really inspired this show is a Boise-based artist, Katherine Shaunessy. Katherine, like Heather, has a practice that crosses lots of different mediums. And several years ago, Katherine was diagnosed with breast cancer. And as part of her treatment, she received 20 days of radiation. During this 20-day course, she came home every day after her treatment and made a small 5 by 5 inch work on a piece of wood panel. They're all, quite abstract, but they have really evocative patterns in them. She used burning a lot, burning of the wood as a way to kind of meditate on the idea of radiation and the idea of burning the body in order to heal it. And so at the conclusion of the series, she considered it, a single piece and a finished body of work. And then over the next several years, a number of people in her family, close family members and a very close friend, were also diagnosed with cancer and also given 20-day courses of radiation. And so for this exhibition, Katherine has created a new body of work, large scale. They each contain burned circles, 20 burned circles that also form sort of arc patterns, evoking again that idea of this machine moving back and forth. They're really beautiful ways to honor these people in her life who have gone through similar experiences. Another artist in the exhibition is Katherine Sherwood, who's based in the Bay Area. She taught in the studio department at Berkeley for many years. And Katherine, at the age of 44, suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage that was really life-changing. It changed not just her daily life, but also her artistic practice. She had been right-handed, and the hemorrhage left her without the use of the right side of her body. So she, over time, retrained herself to paint using her left hand. And there was a transformation in her work in that she went from making these really precise, very carefully made, often smaller scale works to much larger, looser, more gestural paintings and works on paper, often including some of her own MRI scans, images of her brain in her work in really unexpected and playful ways. And in this exhibition, we have works from a recent couple of projects she's been working on, and both in dialogue with the history of art and with issues around gender and disability. We have a really large-scale painting that's made from pieced together art history reproductions. She's made work on the backs of these art history reproductions. It's a quotation of a very well-known 19th century painting, The Bather. And so we have her quoting The Bather, but instead of sort of painting an anonymous, idealized female figure, this bather wears a shoulder brace and a leg brace, has a head wrap made of fMRI scans, like images of brains swirling around her head. Sherwood makes this figure more human and more specific in both her disability and her particularness. We also have 3 really beautiful still life paintings that Sherwood made, quoting Baroque women painters from Northern Europe and from, in this case, Italy and Portugal. So she's taken these compositions by women painters who weren't necessarily very well known in their own time or in the history of art, and then recreated them with her own signature style, this kind of really loose, fabulous brushwork, and then replaced, for instance, some of the fruit or some of the flowers with little images of brain scans that repeat over and over and over. And so for Sherwood, her practice is a way of advocating for disability rights and also navigating her own experience. Dylan Mortimer is based in Los Angeles. He was born with cystic fibrosis, diagnosed at the age of 3 months, and it can be a really brutal and devastating disease. He has been the successful recipient of 2 lung transplants and is really active in his career in kind of advocating for research for cystic fibrosis and for the development of new treatments. And his practice revolves a lot around the idea of breathing and kind of the connection, the sort of interconnectedness between our breathing, the world of plants and botanical imagery. He makes beautiful works of, for instance, lungs that look like trees, or flowers and plants, these lush images with like little cells of either disease or of scar tissue floating in the images. And you know what's really notable about his work is that he works with cut paper and glitter. And for him, the use of glitter is like this act of defiance. It's, as he says, an act of hope in the face of an otherwise really terrible disease. The 5th artist in the exhibition is a painter based in New Mexico named Estelle El Roberge. Estelle lives in a small town in New Mexico, lives on her own, and during the pandemic felt incredibly isolated and cut off from her community. But during lockdown, she described, standing in front of her easel and just being frozen. She couldn't paint. Instead of forcing herself to paint, she began making collages and cutting up paper, marbleized paper that was given to her by a friend, paper that she made, images she found, cutting them up and making these really wonderful small works, collages that are meditations on, some of it on isolation. She uses these images that look like they might be rocks to create what look like shrouded bodies or figures hidden under layers of like some kind of gray fabric. But also, she started visiting a bird sanctuary and watching the cranes during the days. And so there are these more celebratory pictures of cranes, and then portraits of friends that she missed during lockdown too, as a way of connecting with them. The final artist in the exhibition is a very well-known artist based in Washington, D.C., Rene Stout, who has made work about the African diaspora and diasporic traditions from Africa in the southeastern United States and in the Caribbean for decades. And the three works that we have in this exhibition are from a project Stout has involving an alter ego that she's developed called Fatima Mayfield. Fatima, as Rene Stout has invented her, is a healer and a medium who incorporates all kinds of African diasporic healing traditions into her world. And so we have works, for instance, that include lists of herbs and roots that have medicinal properties. We live in a society in which Western medicine tends to be the dominant course of healing, but of course there are lots of different ways to get medical healing. And I love the fact that for Stout, investigating this whole world of traditional healing practices is part of her art. And one of the pieces that we have is called In a Parallel Universe. And not only are there lists of different herbs and roots that are healing, and also a list of all of these significant African American artists, writers, musicians, kind of having conversation and engaged with each other, laughing together in this kind of alternative universe, both living and dead, that she has created in her work. I hope everyone will come in and see the exhibition and maybe use it as an opportunity to think about the way they can integrate arts and creativity into their own daily lives.